Previously on the K-Source.
In John's Gospel, it's not passion, it's glory. The death on the cross was the best thing that happened to Jesus. More on that on a future episode. Unlike the Synoptic Gospels, John does not consider the last few days of Jesus' ministry as a passion narrative. Instead, John refers to it as the book of glory. The reason for that is that John believes that the number one reason why Jesus came was in order to die. Think of the people holding up the signs that say John 3:16. God so loved the earth that he sent his only son to die. That was the purpose of Jesus' ministry in John's perspective. The Synoptic Gospels would have disagreed with that. The Synoptic Gospels would have said that the death was the consequence of Jesus' life. It's everything that Jesus did and said during his ministry is what saves you, and that's ultimately what got Jesus killed. We know this because Matthew, Mark, and Luke kind of rushed through those trial sequences because it was an embarrassment to early Christianity. The cross, this horrific form of death, was an embarrassment. But John disagrees with that. John says that's not an embarrassment. That's not a passion. That's not suffering. That is awesome.
Awesome.
The death of Jesus was why he came. Now, what's wrong with John that he feels this way? Well, John believes that if it wasn't for the cross, there wouldn't be a resurrection. So part of John's agenda is to demonstrate that the cross was necessary so that we can be saved. So John actually portrays Jesus during the first half of his gospel in the book of Signs as indicating that his hour had not yet come. Even when he's talking to his mother, he says, "This is not why I'm here. I'm not here to be a winemaker. This is not why I've come. I'm not here to do your parlor tricks. Ultimately, I'm here to die on the cross so that one can be saved." For us to really see the difference between John's way of doing things and the Synoptic's way of doing things, what I want to do right now is I actually want us to contrast the Synoptic passion from John's book of glory. We've learned in the past, especially when we study the infancy narratives, that audience dictates delivery. However, in this circumstance, we're looking at the same event, Jesus' last hours, if you will, the betrayal, the trials, the walk to Calvary, the death on the cross. It's the same event, but what affects the differences is actually John's image of Jesus. Not so much the audience, but the image, the theological agenda that John is trying to convey. That Jesus is the Logos, that Jesus is God. So, in the Passion narrative, Jesus is having an agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he's praying to his Father, "Father, take this cup away from me. This is not my will, this is your will, so let's please get on the same page here." It's an agony in the garden, a conflict of wills. John, however, has Jesus walking around the garden, and he's saying, "For this purpose I have come." No agony. Jesus is walking through the Garden of Gethsemane. There's no prayerful agony. Instead, Jesus is kind of nonchalantly telling his apostles, what's about to happen is actually why I was born. In the Passion, Judas Iscariot leads the soldiers into the garden and identifies Jesus with a kiss. Gospel of John, Jesus freely walks right over to the soldiers in the garden and asks them, "Who are you looking for?" And the soldiers are like, "We're looking for Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus is like, "I am he." And they're so dumbfounded, they fall backwards. Jesus has to ask a second time, "Who is it that you're looking for?" And the soldiers are like, "We're looking for Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus is like, "Hello, I already told you I am he. Let's get a move on." Jesus has this anxiousness about him to freely submit himself to the soldiers so that this trial and cross can happen.
I volunteer! I volunteer as tribute!
Because Jesus knows the cross is why he was there. No agony. The Synoptics kind of gloss over the Pilate scene. It's a very short trial. Jesus is non-responsive in front of Pilate. Quite the contrast in the Gospel of John. Like the rest of the Gospel of John, Jesus actually uses the trial before Pilate as an opportunity to lecture some more. It's kind of interesting. Pilate dialogues with Jesus as if they're equals, very much unlike what you see in the Synoptic Passion story. And depending on the translation of Bible that you have, it says that either Pilate sits in the judge's seat to determine Jesus' fate, or Pilate actually puts Jesus in the judge's seat while he announces the fate. Very interesting, because again, even though Pilate is the decision maker here, it's like he's consulting Jesus, and Jesus is saying, it's okay, Pilate, this is why I've come. Again, even at the trial, there's no agony. There's a brief torture sequence, but again, John doesn't really dwell on that. As you know, in the Synoptic Gospels, Simon the Cyrene has to carry Jesus' cross, because Jesus is obviously too weak to carry the cross. You don't get that in the Gospel of John. In the Gospel of John, Jesus carries his own cross. Why do you think he does that? It looks more heroic, does it not? To have Jesus needing help, kind of a weakling kind of Jesus. That Gospel of Mark Jesus, the suffering servant. Not this Jesus, confident, heroic Jesus. Epic. Freely carrying the cross. Dramatic. That is the hero going off to battle. Awesome. It's a glorified image of Jesus. Jesus as a hero.
Hero of the day, saved my life. Me amigos, he's a hero.
In the Synoptic Gospels, no one is at the foot of Jesus' cross except for the Roman soldiers. Jesus is very much abandoned. In the Gospel of John, in the Book of Glory, Jesus has got like his whole entourage at the foot of Jesus' cross. No sense of abandonment. And speaking of abandonment, in the Gospels of Mark and Matthew, what does Jesus say on that cross right before he dies? What are his final words? My God, why have you abandoned me? The last words of Jesus in 2 out of the 4 Gospels is that of abandonment, that of frustration, that of agony.
Agony!
What does John's Jesus say? It is finished. It is finished? Where is the agony? It is finished? Again, this is a Jesus that knows everything that's about to happen. This is a Jesus that knows God's plan. Another translation of finished is it is fulfilled. Not agony, not abandonment. He's not questioning God. He is God, and he knows this was part of the plan. This is why he comes, and he simply says, it is finished, and he dies.
Game over.
You've ever seen artwork of Jesus, whether it was a statue or an icon, of Jesus on the cross with a crown in royal garb, Christ the King imagery? You can thank John for that. As a matter of fact, you can probably thank the Gospel of John for our crucifix symbol. Because as I mentioned, the Synoptic Gospels were embarrassed by the crucifixion. And if it wasn't for John indicating for us that the crucifixion was the means for salvation, that the crucifixion led to the resurrection, we probably wouldn't have crucifixes on our walls right now. Our symbol would probably still be the fish. He shows us that the crucifixion is the best thing that ever happened to humanity. Because if it wasn't for the death of Jesus, we wouldn't have the resurrection. We wouldn't have life.